The transfer portal was the MVP of this year's spring game.
You are Locked On Ole Miss, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hi, I'm Stephen Willis, a former staff member at Ole Miss and a 10-year veteran member of the national media with Yahoo Sports. Thank you for tuning in this Transfer Portal Monday. Today on the show, we talk about that transfer portal opening up, and it was what spring was all about and dominated the thoughts all spring, especially after Caden Proctor left Iowa. So a kinder, gentler spring was designed to protect against the next 15 days. The SEC Network also named a position group to watch for in the broadcast, and we look at the targets that are currently out there that we know about. John Macon Gillespie from the Grove Report drops by, and we talk Grove Bowl games, transfer portal, and football and basketball. And Chris Beard got his first commitment of the year. This is the Locked On Ole Miss podcast, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. We're free and available on all the podcast apps and on YouTube. Thanks for making Locked On Ole Miss your first listen every day, and a special hello to the everydayers who make the show what it is. Also, there's still time to join the Grove Collective and help Ole Miss sports moving forward. Go to thegrovecollective.com and join today. The next time we find out about meet and greets, meet the Rebels like they had after the Grove Bowl games, we will let you know here. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. That's why LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the right people for your team faster and for free. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Terms and conditions apply. Now, the Grove Bowl games was over the weekend, and the MVP of those games were the transfer portal, which is opening up today. Ole Miss has already had one player announce his intention to go into the portal, and we have to see how much that goes, because I don't think it would go without saying the next 15 days are probably the most important 15 days in the history of Ole Miss football. And that's a weird testament to say, me talking about that going on. The next 15 days are the most important 15 days in the history of Ole Miss football, because if you listen to prognosticators around the country, the next 15 days are going to see rosters get decimated. You're going to see people in the transfer portal moving around. It doesn't matter if they've already transferred before, they can do it again. And it is going to be very important to basically make it through these 15 days. Now, I have said many times, I do not expect Ole Miss to get gutted or anything like that this transfer portal window. Jackson Dart recruiting these players in the same reason they're here is probably going to be the same reason they're going to stay. Lane Kiffin has spent the better part of the whole spring. You can talk about whether or not it was from a position of fear or not, but he was trying to protect this roster. So no depth chart, nothing that would give anybody reason to be unhappy. Their practices were kinder, gentler, no tackling during the spring. All of that was set up to survive the next 15 days. It's the most important 15 days in the history of Ole Miss football. We know about some transfer portal targets that Ole Miss is going out to add to this roster as well, because that's going to be a part of it, not just losing it, as Ole Miss tries to build a roster that can compete and win the national championship in the fall of 2024. This is the most important 15 days in the history of Ole Miss football because of that. If Ole Miss can make it through this and keep their roster intact, which I think they will, you have a chance to add to it through the transfer portal. And I do think Ole Miss is going to be fairly busy. So let's look at some of these players that we know about. We've all heard about Henry Parrish Jr. We've seen the tweets online. He's been crystal balled to Ole Miss. I genuinely think he's going to end up there. We have to wait for him to announce. You look at him at 100 carries a year ago, 625 yards and 6 touchdowns. He is somebody that can take some of the slack off Ulysses Bentley IV, who is also good for about 100, 120 carries a season. And you have Kedrick Reesano, who is probably good for about 75 to 100 carries as a young football player, but he is completely unproven. So it's going to be imperative that Ole Miss football builds up their running back room. And I think they're going to use the transfer portal to build it up in a way similar to what they did in the quarterback room a year ago. One of the major players in the transfer portal, though, is Damien Martinez. And Ole Miss is listed on the On3 top 5 for this football player. You see his carry number, 194 carries. That means he's durable. 1,185 yards, 9 touchdowns. This is a 232-pound running back who not only fills a position of need, I'm doing air quotes right now, but also fills a role. There's no 232-pound running backs in the Ole Miss system at the moment. Ulysses Bentley, if Henry Parrish shows up at Ole Miss, Kedrick Reesino, even Logan Diggs, who is kind of a thumper, but you can't count on him because of the ACL injury in January. He is kind of more of a 2025 type perspective running back. Damien Martinez would fill a role, and immediately, I've talked about this before, immediately upon coming to Ole Miss has a national championship caliber roster. From that moment on, they have a national championship caliber roster. We're at the point of Lane Kiffin, and I hope Lane Kiffin understands this, because this is where we are. And we talked about this with Jake Crane over the weekend. We've talked about this with a lot of our guests that have come on. If Ole Miss does not make the playoff in 2024, Lane Kiffin is going to get a ton of the blame for that. For whatever reason, whenever you're looking at people to blame, if Ole Miss does not make that playoff, he is going to take the full brunt of a disappointed fan base. Now, that's probably also why the kinder, gentler spring and trying to survive these 15 days was done to begin with. Again, you don't need to break down the Grove Bowl games and all of that stuff. It was not about football. It was about recruiting. It was about retention. But if you want to look at what came out of Saturday, there was no injuries, and you have a situation to where you had a lot of commitments and recruits on campus seeing all of that happening. That was the important part of that day. Wasn't about the football. Don't even worry about the football. If you tuned in for football, you left that game disappointed. If you tuned in for the sideshow, that scratched an itch for you potentially. But the recruits and the players, they got to see all that, the players having a good time. That was the important part of that. And that leading into this transfer portal window is very important. There is a third running back. His name's Dallan Hayden. He's out of Memphis, actually. He's Aaron Hayden's son who went to Tennessee. Dallan's not going to go to Tennessee. But this is his number from his true freshman year. He redshirted as a sophomore. Nearly a little bit over 5 yards a carry, 111 carries. Good running back. NFL potential if you ask Brian Smith, which we did this past weekend. And he's a really good player as well. Now, everybody knows about the running back position at Ole Miss. During the broadcast of the Grove Bowl games, they probably announced something maybe that everybody should be paying attention to. And that is that Pete Golding wants to add potentially a linebacker to the linebacker room as well. Now, it all depends on how good that linebacker is. He's not just going to go add a body, but he's going to add a linebacker potentially. And that is Poopall played well. He had a pick six in their Grove Bowl games and in pass coverage. We had Max Chadwick on talking about Chris Poopall a couple of weeks ago, and he said pass coverage was a thing. He goes out in a 7-on-7 competition, has a pick six. So that is a good step, but who is going to slot in beside him? You have Tyler Banks, you have Suntarine Perkins, you have TJ Dudley, but TJ Dudley and Suntarine Perkins might be getting a little bit of work on the outside of the defense, and it's not looking as a plugger in the middle. So we'll see who and what Ole Miss brings in as linebackers if they are looking that direction. Well, again, Jordan Rodgers and Tom Hart during the broadcast talked about Pete Golding specifically saying they were looking at maybe bringing in a linebacker. So that and the running back feels like the top two positions to pay attention to for Ole Miss fans going into this portal season. This is a lot of goodwill and stuff that can happen over the next 15 days. But it's important that Ole Miss doesn't lose players in the transfer portal. Well, not doesn't lose players. Losing players is acceptable as long as it's the right players. You don't want to lose somebody that you were potentially counting on. You want it to lose somebody that is trying to realize that they've fallen down the depth chart just for whatever reason, and they're trying to go someplace to actually play. Those players you're going to be okay with losing. You don't want to lose somebody that you're going to count on. Like it would be a hurt thing if Suntarine Perkins decided to transfer, somebody like that. But Joshua Harris, who transferred away, we'll talk about him with John Macon Gillespie. He only had 13 tackles, no TFLs, no sacks, no quarterback hurries. He played a little bit last year, a nose guard type player, but he is going to transfer out. So it's somebody that played. He's at more a depth piece, but when Walter Nolan was brought in, Joshua Harris became kind of extra to what is going on for Ole Miss football. So this transfer portal window, these next 15 days, going to be the most important 15 days in the history of Ole Miss football. If you make it to May 1st, May 2nd, without having your roster get gutted, then all of a sudden you can plan ahead and get ready for what is going to be an unbelievable playoff type run. Heck, Joel Klatt in the spring game for the Ohio State Buckeyes used Ole Miss as an example of trying to get a Southern team up to the horseshoe to play a playoff game. Now, it isn't the hottest take in the world that says you want a home playoff game. That's not the hottest take in the world. But the fact that Ole Miss was using it as the example, that is pretty cool indeed. So thanks again for making Locked On Ole Miss your first listen of the day. John Macon Gillespie was in attendance yesterday and has all the thoughts on Ole Miss this spring. You know, when you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help you find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. It's not just a job board. LinkedIn helps you hire the professionals you can't find anyone else. Even when those aren't actively searching for a new job, but they might be open for that perfect role. In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place, honestly. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. Hire professionals like a professional with LinkedIn. LinkedIn knows that small businesses are wearing so many hats and they might not have the time or the resources to hire. It's no different than hiring a football coach. If you hire the right one, you're going to be in the conversation for the playoff in relatively short order. If you hire the wrong one, you're going to be hiring another one in 3 years. The same thing happens with hiring for your team. If you hire the wrong one, though, you might be doing it in 3 weeks. And you just don't have the time to handle hiring this over and over again. Small business owners are wearing so many hats, and they just don't have the time or the resources for this hire. So post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. It's Locked On NFL Mock Draft live season on April 17th at 7 o'clock Eastern Time, streaming on the Locked On Sports Today 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube or the free Fire Amazon Fire TV channels app. Find the ultimate 6-episode series on April 17th at 7 o'clock Eastern Time to hear who the local Locked On experts are predicting for every NFL franchise, with live reactions from local college football experts and even the fantasy football angle. The Locked On NFL mock draft on April 17th at 7 Eastern, streaming live on the Locked On Sports Today 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. John Macon Gillespie from the Grove Report joins us here on the Locked On Ole Miss podcast. How you doing, John?
Doing pretty well. Just had an
Will
interesting
Furness walk off well?
Yeah. Just had an interesting baseball finish. That's where I was going. First, I tweeted as we record this. I guess about 30 minutes ago that the last time Ole Miss won a baseball series over state, I was a junior in high school. So it's been.
I hate you.
Yeah, and a lot of people are now hating on social media for that, but yeah, it's been a long time coming, and it's strange that this is the team that was able to do it, to kind of break that streak. But we'll see where it takes them.
Yeah, we'll talk about this a little bit later, but I do have the point where it's like, did Johnny Long fix Ole Miss baseball? Because from that moment on, this was a completely different baseball team.
Oh, without a doubt, yeah, and that'll definitely be a talking point.
Yeah. So you were in the stadium for the Grove Bowl games. I saw it on television. It looked like it was fun in the stadium. It looked like the players were having a blast. It looked like recruits were having a blast. I still can't get that Brandon Turnage dunk out of my head. I don't know how he did it. I'm wondering, was that a 10-foot goal?
No.
Oh, okay.
It didn't appear to be, now, unless I'm not good with depth perception and stuff, but it did not look to me, because I was down there on the field for that when that dunk happened, and to me it did not appear to be 10 feet, but I don't quote me on that necessarily.
Yeah, but yeah, that Brandon Turnage dunk is just kind of living in my head. The game I mentioned earlier in the week, I talked about what was going on. I kind of covered it from most every angle. Football wise, if you were looking for football, that was not your event. You were going to leave that event disappointed. If you wanted a, lack of a better word, and I don't not mean this in a negative connotation at all, a circus, that was kind of for you.
Yeah, and a comparison was drawn to some people will understand this reference, others may not, but an elementary school field day type thing. It was basically kind of like that, with a little bit of football mixed in. But yeah, I mean, it was, to me, I do think that from a fan engagement perspective and an injury perspective and all those things, I mean, it was successful. I mean, it seemed like, even from a marketing perspective, it seemed like it went really well. Obviously, the Joey Chestnut thing was big, dunk contest, all that kind of stuff. But as far as actual football goes, no, I mean, there was really nothing there. I mean, it was at times it was even hard to tell who was who down there from the box perspective, because
I think Kelvin Bolden got some reps at wide receiver.
Yeah, I mean, it's like that kind of thing,
Yeah.
So, but I do think it was fun. I mean, it was a change of pace and that kind of thing. But, if what their goals were to come out of there injury free and kind of have a marketing ploy, I think that they accomplished what they set out to do.
Yeah, whenever I got like an hour before kickoff, I was like, this is my checklist for if this was a worthwhile event. And one was no injuries whatsoever, and Ole Miss made it out completely injury-free. I thought that Ole Miss needed some PR nationally, and it hasn't really caught on the way that I think it has, but that may be the fact that Iran and Israel is going through and they've got attention elsewhere at the moment. And I think that 2+ commitments need to be the result of this, and we won't know that for a couple of weeks.
Yeah, I mean, and how I don't mean for this to sound as dramatic as it may sound, but like the overall success of an event like this, you usually don't know until you look back at it in retrospect. That's how I'm kind of taking it anyway. With commitments, and if other programs kind of tend to follow suit with something like this, which was a big talking point yesterday in media availabilities, asking Lane, even Joey Chestnut, who we got, if they thought this could be something that other programs kind of adopt moving forward. And personally, I think it will be, but we'll just have to see.
Yeah, the sports reporter, just so everybody knows is watching this, hates spring practice with the fire of 1,000 suns. So they're hoping this catches on with other programs. They're trying to will it into existence a little bit. But there is a chance that it could happen. I said that earlier in the week. It's like, if this is success, other people are going to do this, because you've seen in recent years, like, teams have actually just canceled their spring game. And it's one of those weird situations to where, okay, we're doing away with football in the spring as far as spectator football in the spring, but let's have a square jam type event, because I do think, and one thing that's said is like, hey, if we could save the spring game just for the spring game's sake, and then just do this the first weekend of August and set it up to bring people in to do it, that might be more of a commercial or marketing success than even what they did.
Yeah, I mean, because then you're actually, I mean, the season this year starts in late August for Ole Miss and most schools, I guess, because week one is like August 30th, 31st, that vicinity. So for sure, I mean, you'd be really leading into the actual season now. Spring is done, and we're, heading full force into summer talking season. And by the time we hit about June or July, I mean, we'll kind of be exhausted with that. So,
Yeah.
you know.
My only trepidation over this whole thing is, if Ole Miss would have played a regular football game and marketed as a regular game with as much anticipation as this team has, there would have been 35,000 people in that stadium, and you could have charged $10 a head, given all the money of the Grove Collective, and that'd been an easy way to clear 350 bills.
Yeah, I mean, that's really the only drawback, I think. And there was obviously, it's not as big as, the ticket sales going towards the Grove Collective, but there was kind of a Grove Collective push yesterday. I mean, they did do some QR code type stuff and things like that in the actual stadium. So,
Good.
That's a angle, I guess, even if the ticket sales weren't going to be a thing.
All right. But the transfer portal opened up today, finally started, and everybody's talking about how much chaos could happen. We've already heard three or four names that could be mentioned with Ole Miss. We've heard ridiculous stuff. We've heard talking heads talk about how the next 15 days could gut your favorite program. Potentially what's going on. And that's the reason all of the Grow Bowl games and what they did in the spring was, like I said in the first segment of this show, was to prevent that from happening. Happy players don't leave. So you try to keep them as happy as possible. Now, we've seen on Twitter, like, it looks like Henry Parrish is coming back. We've seen that Ole Miss is going after Damien Martinez, the running back out of Oregon State, who Brian Smith, the Florida football scout, our Locked On recruiting analyst, said he was a better head-to-head running back than Quinshon Judkins. And that tells me, with what's going on, it looks like Ole Miss has a chance to do to the running back room this year what they did to the quarterback room a year ago.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of a good comparison, because let's say, for the sake of argument, that both of those guys end up in Oxford. I think you're going to view, or at least I will. I don't know that the outside people who aren't really as close to the program will. I would view the running back room as having taken a significant step forward than it did a season ago. Obviously, I mean, the loss of Quinshon Judkins, I mean, regardless of how you feel emotionally about it, that is a blow to this roster. But adding potentially adding two names like that, to me makes the room better than it was entering last year. And, those, national talking heads and guys like that will still point back to that Judkins loss, because it has, kind of a hot name attached to it. Judkins is a name that stirs up a lot of attention. But to me, I think that would be ultimately a win for that running back room for Ole Miss. Because, I mean, you come into the year with those guys, Bentley, Diggs, once he's eventually healthy. I mean, it would be a really good situation.
Yeah, the talent on this team. If you've got somebody like Damien Martinez, I like to say all the time, it's not that you're filling a hole, it's that you're filling a role. And that's a different type player than you have in other parts of the room. And the versatility, because he's 232 pounds. He's a good back. So that would be interesting. Also, Jordan Rodgers, during the broadcast, you were at the game, you probably did not hear this, mentioned that Pete Golding said that they were looking for a linebacker in the transfer portal. We've all been running back centric, but he mentioned specifically linebacker. What do you think about that? I think what that says is that TJ Dudley and Suntaran Perkins is maybe more D-line focused this year than we think they are.
Yeah, I mean, that could be the case. And I think too, obviously I didn't hear that because I was in the box, and I'm pretty sure the Masters was on TV inside the press box. So I know that the broadcast of the game itself was not.
That tracks. That tracks.
Yeah. So I mean, that's kind of where we were as a collective group. But yeah, and one, I think obviously this is cliche, but you're always looking to improve your roster. And with the work Ole Miss did on the defensive line, to me, the next step would be linebacker, and what the secondary is kind of looking like and that kind of stuff. But two, yeah, I had not actually thought of that about the potential defensive line focus for those guys. That's a really good point. That could track. I mean, that could be pretty accurate. And if I'm not going to doubt Pete Golding's ability to go out and find a linebacker in the transfer portal after what we saw leading up to spring. I am not fixing to say, hey, there's not going to be anybody. Obviously, I haven't heard any names or anything like that, but if anybody can go get a linebacker out of the portal, with somebody setting their mind to that, I think Pete Golding is the guy. So if he has his mind set on that, I wouldn't be surprised if it happens.
No, it's not all good news, or it might be good news. With players coming in, if you're going to bring people in the portal, people are going to have to leave. So you're going to have some attrition. You just need the attrition to be outside of players that you're counting on. You don't need a Caden Proctor type situation to happen. But Joshua Harris has entered the portal. He was a nose guard. He kind of was made surplus to requirements whenever Walter Nolan came into the house. But he's the first Ole Miss name to hit the portal. And it's not, like I said, it's not a huge loss, but it's a name that people are going to know, and a name that honestly a lot of people are going to confuse with Xavion Harris.
Yeah. It's kind of it kind of just comes with the territory a little bit in situations like this. Obviously I think he's a very talented player. Came from NC State, and the size is definitely there. I think he's productive, but when you add the guys that Ole Miss did out of the portal leading up to the spring, I mean that's going to happen. And it's not a loss that's the end of the world, and that's kind of how you have to look at it, because losses are inevitably going to happen in this day and age. You just have to kind of strategically plan where those are going to be.
Still more to come on the Locked On Ole Miss podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Ole Miss got a big commitment for Chris Beard, and also, did Ole Miss baseball kind of get fixed a little bit this weekend? We'll talk about that in just a second. It's playoff time in the NBA and NHL. Baseball's in full swing, and FanDuel is your place to bet every single game. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets, guaranteed. That's $150, win or lose. One of the things you can bet on is Ole Miss and their odds to make the 2024 college football playoff. Currently, a yes payout is minus 122, which is about 54% probability of happening. I thought that was pretty interesting, but that's not all I thought was interesting, because found out I could bet on everything from slap shots to home runs to slam dunks, all on an app that's safe, secure, and easy to use. What are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to make your first bet an automatic win. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Now it's also available on Amazon Fire TV and the free Fire TV Channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every single league. Find Locked On Sports Today, now available on the free Fire TV Channels app. Be part of history. All right, John, we're going to change gears just a little bit and talk about a player Michael Brown Jones out of North Carolina Greensboro transferred to Ole Miss. I'm pretty excited about this player, especially when you look at the problems that Ole Miss basketball had in the low post. He's a really good player. He averaged nearly 19 points a game, 7.5 rebounds, and assist and a half, or assist 1.1 assists per game as well. About 6'8" player. He kind of fits the profile of the typical Chris Beard kind of compact big.
Yeah, I think that this is a pretty big addition for Beard and his group. Obviously, I mean, with he finished first team All SoCon, I believe, last year. I think he's pretty versatile in what he kind of brings to the table. And it's interesting to me, just kind of the approach that seeing Beard's approach in the portal unfold kind of before our eyes a little bit after all the Arkansas stuff. I think this is a really big time for momentum, I think, for the program. And being able to secure a guy like this, I think, just kind of secures that a little bit.
Yeah, and another player was on campus visiting this weekend. Technically, if you want to look at it, Brown Jones was probably the first commitment of the Grove Bowl days, if you want to look at it that way. But Malik Dia was another big man. He's a 6'9" big man out of Belmont that actually visited as well. You can see that front court scoring and talent is kind of well on the priority list for Chris Beard.
Yeah, and I mean, as it should be, right? I mean, and I think something else that's kind of going back to the momentum thing, Jalen Murray coming back, I think is going to be big. Obviously, that's a completely different position, but I say that to say, that leading into some potential recruiting and perception momentum is big. But that area should definitely be a focus based on what we kind of saw in conference play this past year. I think that if you asked anybody off the street, that would be their guess as to what the focus would be in the portal. And so far, it seems like that's where they're headed.
It seems like towards the end of the year, once everybody figured out what's going on, the bigs, the +7 footers, they were a liability defensively because they switch and everything. They need everything. And basically the other team was just letting them switch and switch and switch until they were on their best score. And then they would go by them, blow right by them into the basket.
Yeah. And that became kind of glaringly noticeable. Some of those really painful, and I don't use that word lightly, very painful defensive sequences and rebounding sequences that we saw kind of late in the year, I think can be credited to that. So take another route, see what you can grab out of the portal. And if early returns are any indication, that's a big positive step in the right direction.
And Ole Miss took a series from the Mississippi State Bulldogs and honestly walk-off fashion. They ruled the Bulldogs on Sunday on a walk-off home run. They took them in extra innings after Johnny Long decided to pull out his best Tennessee 2022 impression, and that completely backfired on him, and karma got him in the end. Ole Miss looked like a different team from after Mike Bianco got thrown out for that. Whenever Mike Bianco lost everything, this was a focused team. Mason Nichols he was a good Sunday starter. It's at the point where, okay, if he throws like that, you're probably going to win on Sunday more than you lose.
Yeah, I think that's very easy to say because State had, 2 runs, I believe, on Sunday, if I have that correct. That will play on Sundays. I mean, just because Sundays are known for being really offensive days because it's your third arm out there. But yeah, and Mike said last night that he didn't, you hear sometimes about coaches strategically getting thrown out because, hey, I want to fire up my team. He said he doesn't really buy into all that. Whether that's true or not, I don't know. Regardless, it worked, or it seemed to anyway. It seemed to really fire everybody up. Ole Miss would not go down quietly at all on Saturday. I mean, they on Saturday night leading up to midnight or so, continued to fight back, tie the game. And when Jackson Ross had that walk-off single, I think it was not just jubilation, but kind of an exhale that, hey, this skid is finally officially behind us. I mean, because we got one, boys. I mean, we finally got another win. But the celebration was was telling, I think. And then that just carried over into Sunday. That I mean, it really wasn't close from the get go, and who knows what will happen because of this, but we kind of declared them dead a little bit on the podcast last week.
Yeah.
We'll see what happens, but now 5 wins in the SEC, still a lot of work to do, but this is definitely something that can spark a turnaround.
Well, I haven't looked at the schedule, so I'm not exactly sure who they play next week. But if Ole Miss can get 3 in a sweep, all of a sudden you're 8-10 in the SEC, and everything's in front of you.
Yeah, which again, it's a lot to ask for a sweep in the SEC, but it's there. I mean, it's a possibility.
Missouri swept 4.
Yeah, I mean, and it is baseball. I mean, stranger things happen. So if something like that were to happen, I mean, then we're having a completely different conversation this time next week.
Yeah, it should be really interesting. What do you got going on at the Grove Report this week?
Well, spring practice now, obviously winding down. I think there's some interesting, I don't know if human interest is the right word, but that kind of angle from some quotes that came out of media availabilities yesterday or on Saturday that we weren't able to do just yet, kind of saving those for later in the week. Got some of that. Obviously, going to have baseball. Hitting this home stretch of the season, and transfer portal. I mean, that's going to be the driving force, really for everybody over the next period of time.
Thanks for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen every day. We have the most perspective surrounding Ole Miss sports, and is one of the many reasons we are the number one Ole Miss podcast, and thank you very much for that. But for your second listen, check out Locked On Sports Today. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows that cover every single league. Find Locked On Sports Today now available on the free Fire TV Channels app. For those of you on YouTube, though, we'll send you there right now. Howdy toddy, everyone.